What if forgiveness isn't a moral virtue, but a radical act of freedom? What if the real power isn't in holding on, but in letting go? We live in a world that worships memory. Every hurt, every betrayal, every slight becomes part of our story. We wear pain like armor. We rehearse our injuries until they become identity. And yet, deep within the chaos of resentment, there is a hidden door. Forgiveness. Not the weak kind. Not the one that demands forgetting or surrender, but the kind that severs the chain of cause and consequence, that disrupts the machinery of vengeance, that says, enough. Nelson Mandela didn't leave his prison with chains in his heart. Jesus, nailed to the cross, asked for his enemies to be forgiven. Ancient texts whisper of this mystery, the power to release what was never ours to carry. This is where our journey begins, with a paradox. Forgiveness, the most difficult human act, may also be the most liberating. But to understand why, we must walk through the fire of philosophy, history, and self. Hannah Arendt didn't speak of forgiveness as a sentiment. She called it a necessity. In The Human Condition, Arendt dared to say what few philosophers had, that forgiveness isn't about virtue, it's about survival. Without it, human beings become prisoners of their own actions, locked in cycles of retribution with no key, no exit, no beginning again. Forgiveness, she wrote, is a break in the chain of consequences. It is an act that defies time. For Arendt, this wasn't abstract theory. She lived through betrayal, exile, genocide. She watched her mentor, Heidegger, embrace the Nazi regime. She understood what it meant to live in a world where justice is too late and memory too cruel. And yet she saw something luminous beneath the rubble of history, the possibility of beginning again, from ancient Greek amnestia to the radical forgiveness of the Gospels. Arendt traced a lineage of renewal. Forgiveness, she claimed, is how we reclaim the future. It is how we say the past will not dictate who I am. In this light, forgiveness is not submission, it is rebellion, a refusal to be defined by harm, a way to take power not over others, but over our own fate. When we forgive, what exactly changes? Is it the memory, the pain, the person, or is it something deeper, the fabric of reality itself? To forgive is to bend time. It is to say, the past may have shaped me, but it does not own me. Forgiveness alters the story. It reclaims authorship. It rethreads meaning. In mystical traditions, forgiveness is seen as a sacred act. In Kabbalah, it is a repair of the broken world. In Buddhism, it is the release of karmic entanglement. Modern neuroscience even reveals that forgiveness changes brain chemistry, calms the body and quiets the storm. But more than that, it reshapes identity. You are no longer the victim, no longer the wounded, no longer the one who carries the memory like a wound. You become something else. Forgiveness is alchemy, not because it turns hate to love, but because it turns history into presence, pain into possibility. And yet, if this power is so available, so transformative, why do we resist it? Grievance is addictive. It makes us feel righteous, protected, in control. The ego feeds on the narrative of injury. It says, I was wronged, therefore I am. But Arendt knew. The price of this illusion is steep. Memory without forgiveness becomes violence, not to others, but to ourselves. We revisit our wounds, convinced that remembering is justice, but remembrance without release is a prison. History shows us the cost. In Rwanda, in Bosnia, in the long shadow of apartheid. And yet, even there, some chose differently. Some chose the impossible. They forgave, not because they forgot, but because they were done bleeding. To forgive is to confront the false self, the one who lives through pain, the one who wears suffering like a crown. This is the dark night of the soul, the place where we decide, do I want to be right or free? Here is the secret. Forgiveness is not something you do. It is something you allow. It is not an emotional burden. It is an existential shift. When you forgive, you do not erase the story. You rewrite your role in it. You are no longer the character acted upon, you become the author. Arendt called forgiveness the ability to act. Simone Weil called it grace. Rumi said it was the soul remembering itself. Forgiveness is sovereignty, not over others, but over your own state of being. You forgive not because they deserve it, but because you no longer want to live in the illusion of separation. You forgive because you are tired of being small. You forgive because there is something in you greater than the wound. So what now? What would it mean to walk through the world unburdened, not forgetful, not naive, but untethered? What would it mean to live as one who has already forgiven the world? This is not the end of the journey, it is the beginning. Forgiveness is not the final act. It is the first breath of a new life, a life where your story is not bound by pain, but lit by freedom, a life where memory becomes wisdom, not weapon, a life where your heart, once fractured, becomes the doorway to something divine. The question remains, what would it take to forgive everything? They say to forgive is to forget. But what if that's the greatest lie we've ever told ourselves? What if the true path to forgiveness begins not with erasing the past, but with confronting it, remembering it in vivid detail and still choosing to release its grip? Forgiveness, a word wrapped in softness, often confused with weakness. But what if it's the opposite? What if forgiveness is the most powerful act a human being can perform? Not an act of surrender, but of ultimate freedom. Enter Hannah Arendt, a philosopher forged in the fire of the Holocaust, a thinker who dared to define forgiveness as the only force capable of interrupting the unstoppable chain of human consequences. This is not a journey into sentiment. This is a journey into power, into memory, into the radical possibility of healing not by forgetting but by becoming fully awake. Across centuries, forgiveness has taken many forms. In Christian theology, it is divine. In Buddhism, it is the dissolving of attachment. Among indigenous tribes, it is a ritual of reconciliation. In every tradition, forgiveness sits at the crossroads of morality and identity. In ancient Greece, forgiveness was less about mercy and more about restoring balance. In medieval Europe, it became a sacrament, a bridge between sinner and salvation. Modern psychology reframes it as self-liberation, a tool to relieve emotional burden. But here lies the tension. Has forgiveness been used as a spiritual act of grace or as a societal demand to maintain order? Hannah Arendt, born into a world torn by fascism and genocide, understood forgiveness not as a spiritual pleasantry, but as a political necessity. For her, forgiveness was one of two essential acts, alongside promising that allows human beings to navigate a world where actions are irreversible. Where most saw forgiveness as personal, Arendt saw it as public. Not an escape from consequence, but an invitation to begin again. Forgiveness, Arendt believed, is the power to interrupt, to sever the chain of cause and effect, to stop history from writing its next chapter in blood. In her seminal work, The Human Condition, Arendt explores the idea that every action sets off a cascade of events. We act and we cannot undo, but through forgiveness we can interrupt. This isn't about emotional closure. It isn't about the person who harmed us. It is about reclaiming the pen and rewriting the narrative. Forgiveness becomes the ability to choose freedom over fate. It's not effortless because it is easy. It's effortless because it transcends the logic of retribution. It lifts us from the past, not by erasing it, but by rendering it impotent. To forgive, then, is to stand outside the storm, not untouched, but unbound. It is the quiet, revolutionary act of saying, "The past ends with me." This concept is no mere theory. It lives and breathes in the choices of extraordinary people. Nelson Mandela, imprisoned for 27 years, emerged not with vengeance, but with a vision. He forgave not because the pain was small, but because the future was vast. Forgiveness for Mandela was a political act, a tool of transformation, not capitulation. The Sufi mystic Rumi wrote, "Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right-doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there." Forgiveness in mystical traditions is not about justice, it's about transcendence. It is not about forgetting, but about remembering from a higher plane. Modern science agrees. Studies in neuroscience show that forgiveness changes the brain, lowering cortisol, rewiring trauma, restoring emotional equilibrium. Whether through mystics, revolutionaries, or therapists, one truth emerges. Forgiveness is the alchemy of pain into possibility. It is the sacred fire that transforms suffering into sovereignty. Forgiveness. It sounds simple, a moral good, a spiritual triumph, the golden key to peace. And yet, for so many of us, it feels like betrayal, a violation of justice, a surrender. We say we want to forgive, and yet something inside resists, recoils. It clings. Why? Because forgiveness is not merely about another person. It's about you, your identity, your story, your pain. This section begins with a haunting paradox. Forgiveness is liberation, but it feels like loss. We explore the psychological grip of resentment, how the human mind is wired to replay the story of the wound. In ancient texts from the Bhagavad Gita to the Gospels, forgiveness is exalted as divine, but even there it's portrayed as an act beyond normal human capacity. What if our struggle to forgive isn't a weakness, but a misunderstanding? What if we've been taught the wrong story about what forgiveness actually is? Nietzsche warned of the slave morality of forgiveness, a facade for powerlessness. But modern neuroscience tells another tale. Holding on to anger rewires the brain, fuels anxiety, damages the body. So we stand at a crossroads, to forgive and be free, or to hold on and remain chained. But how do we let go when the pain is still real? The mystery deepens, and it leads us to a thinker who saw forgiveness not as a moral duty, but as a metaphysical necessity. Enter Hannah Arendt, political theorist, survivor, philosopher of power and evil. Known for her chilling concept of the banality of evil, Arendt witnessed firsthand the unspeakable, and yet she wrote not just about justice but about forgiveness. Our topic so radical, it remains one of the most overlooked aspects of her thought. In her masterwork, The Human Condition, Arendt proposes a startling idea. Forgiveness is not about kindness, it's not even about morality. It is about time. Every human action, she writes, is irreversible. Once done, it cannot be undone. And yet without forgiveness, we are trapped by what has already happened. Forgiveness, for Arendt, is the only force that can interrupt the chain of consequences. It breaks the wheel. It creates the space for something new, not as a religious virtue, but as a human power. Forgiveness is the ability to start again, to make a future that is not enslaved by the past. Arendt places this revelation within the realm of politics, where vengeance and memory create cycles of war. But her insight reaches deeper. She suggests that forgiveness is what allows plurality, the existence of many selves, many perspectives, to even be possible. Without it, every action becomes a prison, every word a verdict. Arendt dares to ask, what kind of world can we create if we learn to forgive? Forgiveness may be freedom, but memory is the warden. To forgive is not to forget, but memory rarely allows that distinction. We are creatures of recollection, and memory, when fused with emotion, becomes identity. I am the one who was betrayed. I am the victim. In this section, we dive into the metaphysical weight of memory. Trauma leaves an imprint not only in the mind, but in the body. Neuroscience confirms what mystics long suspected. Past pain can shape present reality. In psychoanalysis, The return of the repressed creates unconscious loops. In Eastern traditions, karma is memory in motion, an energetic residue that shapes your present from your unresolved past. Forgiveness then appears not just as a moral act, but as a radical rewrite of one's narrative. To forgive is to dismantle the internal scaffolding of "I was wronged" and risk becoming someone new. But herein lies the danger. Without that story, who are you? The ego resists. It needs continuity. It needs to know who it is. And yet, to remain identified with the pain is to drink poison and hope the past changes. Forgiveness demands a new metaphysics, a new sense of self, and this is where the transformation begins. Now we step through the veil, the core revelation. Forgiveness is not emotional, it is not rational, it is ontological. It is a shift in being, a metaphysical technology. What if time itself is not linear? What if the past, present, and future are not distinct compartments but states of consciousness? Quantum theory suggests particles behave differently when observed. Could consciousness alter reality in ways we don't yet understand? Mystical traditions think so. In Sufism, forgiveness is not the end of conflict. It is the beginning of remembrance. In Vedanta, it is the dissolving of duality. To forgive is to step outside of time, to say, what happened, happened, but it no longer defines me. It no longer lives here. In this section, we explore forgiveness as a way of collapsing karmic loops. The ego may want retribution, but the soul seeks wholeness. We draw on suppressed Gnostic teachings, where forgiveness is initiation into higher knowledge, a cutting of the tether to lower self. This is the hidden truth Arendt hints at. Forgiveness is a superhuman act, not because it is divine, but because it is free. It is the triumph of will over determinism. It is what makes the future possible. But now the twist. What if forgiveness is too easy? What if in forgiving we erase the voice of the victim? In the aftermath of horror, there is a moral impulse. To remember, to honor, to hold accountable. Arendt herself grappled with this. At the trial of Adolf Eichmann, she was condemned for suggesting that evil could be banal, not monstrous but thoughtless. Could such a man be forgiven? Here we confront the tension between justice and mercy. When we forgive, do we let perpetrators escape responsibility, or do we transcend vengeance? We draw from the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where forgiveness became political strategy. And we explore Derrida's idea that true forgiveness must forgive the unforgivable. This section challenges the viewer. Not all wounds want to heal. Not all victims seek peace. Is it moral to forgive without understanding? Or is forgiveness a way of asserting one's power, not over another, but over fate? Here the mystery deepens. There is no clear answer. And yet, something stirs. At last we return to the self, not the wounded self, not the story, but the one who stands behind it all. Forgiveness is not for others. It is a return, a remembrance. In this closing section we journey inward, through mystical poetry, through silence, through the soul's longing. Rumi writes, "Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right-doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there." That field is forgiveness, not as erasure, but as transcendence. The ego cannot forgive, it can only forget, but the soul forgives by dissolving the illusion of separation. Here, forgiveness becomes a portal to awakening, a rebirth. The old self dies. The one who was hurt, the one who was angry, fades, and in its place, something vast and nameless arises. You remember who you are, not a victim, not a saint, but a being beyond story. Forgiveness, then, is not a moral act. It is the highest form of freedom. It is how we begin again. They say forgiveness sets you free, but if that's true, why do we hold on so tightly? We clutch our pain like a sacred relic, turning it over in the dark, replaying the betrayal, the hurt, the injustice, not because we want to suffer, but because it defines us. Who are we without our scars? Here's the paradox. We long for peace but resist the very act that offers it. Forgiveness effortless in theory, excruciating in practice. What if the reason it's so hard is because we've misunderstood what it truly is? This isn't a moral lesson. This is a journey into the architecture of the soul, and at the center of it, a forgotten idea. One that political philosopher Hannah Arendt left like a secret key buried in plain sight. She wasn't a spiritual teacher. She didn't write about forgiveness as an emotional catharsis. For Arendt, forgiveness was something far more radical, a power that bends time, severs destiny, and allows us to rewrite the script of reality itself. Stay with me. This isn't just about forgiving others. This is about remembering who you were before the wound. Hannah Arendt witnessed the 20th century unravel. Born in 1906, she lived through the rise of fascism, fled Nazi Germany, and watched the world try and fail to reckon with unimaginable evil. She saw something in humanity that most refuse to face, that we are capable of horrors beyond comprehension, and that after such acts, nothing can truly go back to how it was. This is what she called the irreversible. Once something is done, it cannot be undone. But in this bleak observation, Arendt discovered something astonishing, a crack in the machinery of time, a hidden force that allows us to disrupt the irreversible forgiveness, not as sentiment, not as absolution, but as a force capable of interrupting the endless chain of cause and effect. You see, Arendt believed that if we couldn't forgive, we'd be doomed to repeat, that every wrong would breed another, that vengeance would become infinite. Forgiveness, then, is not a luxury. It's the only thing that makes the future possible, not by erasing the past, but by unbinding us from it.